Et c'est parti live. Tu m'entends?
Ouais.
Parfait. Alors, donc on va commencer. Désolé, il y a eu un petit souci technique. En tout cas, maintenant, on est live. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue dans cette nouvelle session de Capital B Talks avec cette fois-ci Yves Choueifaty, président fondateur de Tobam, que nous avons le plaisir d'avoir avec nous aujourd'hui. Hello everyone, thank you for being here today. Today we have Yves Choueifaty, President and founder of Tobam in Capital B Talks with us today. It is a great pleasure for us as Tobam has been a great partner with Capital B since the very beginning. Tobam has been a pioneer in Bitcoin since 2017 in Bitcoin and since 2020 in Bitcoin treasury companies. And Yves is one of the most recognized thought leaders in France and in the world for Bitcoin. So
In
thank
the
you, Yves,
universe.
for all your work in Bitcoin since the beginning. It is really an honor for us to have you as partner and have you here today in the talk. How are you, Yves, today, and what is in your mind today?
So thanks a lot for this message, Alexandre, and thank you for inviting me. I am very happy to share some opinions and some facts with everybody that could be interested in Capital B. My thoughts today are, if I wanted to summarize it in one word, I would use evangelize. So I think we have accumulated plenty of knowledge, plenty of intuitions as well. And we try to spend plenty of our time spreading those intuitions and this knowledge. And I hope this will be another opportunity to discuss and gain some challenges. So this is what
Perfect.
is in my mind.
Yves, for the listeners, before we go in depth into the questions on your vision on Bitcoin, on the debasement that is happening on Bitcoin treasury companies on the market, could you maybe describe Tobam first for people?
Yes, so maybe I should spend two sentences on me as well. So, in terms of education, I am a mathematician. I have done all my career in asset management since the beginning. So, my previous job before launching Tobam was Chief Executive Officer of Crédit Lyonnais Asset Management. Then I left Crédit Lyonnais at the early stage of the merger between Crédit Lyonnais and Crédit Agricole. And this is when I launched Tobam. Tobam stands for Think Out of the Box Asset Management. And the aim of Tobam is to build exposures that are not yet provided by the reference players of asset management. So what we try to do is in a nutshell, what BlackRock doesn't do yet. And as soon as BlackRock does it, we leave the room and we give them the room and we try to do something else. So the first thing we did at Tobam in 2005, I think we pioneered, together with a good friend of mine, which is in California, Robert Knott, we pioneered the field of smart beta. Himself, he wrote in June 2005 an article called Fundamental Indexation. And ourselves, we invented a measurement of diversification. And together, we launched what became smart beta. Smart beta is now hundreds of billions, run by BlackRock and the allies. And of course, we had to reinvent ourselves when they really saturated the world with what became a commodity business. In 2013, we began exploring a new gadget called Bitcoin. At that time, my interest in gadget was the same kind of interest as I had in radio sets when I was 12 years old. When I was 10 or 12 years old, as soon as I saw a radio set, I used to dismantle it to understand how it works. So our idea in 2013 was that these claims of Bitcoins were unbelievable. We could not believe something had this kind of claim. So the idea was to understand how it worked. And after a couple of weeks, I realized we were 4 of us at Tobam owning Bitcoins in 2013. Really for small quantities, because we are curious, out of curiosity. And then when we realized we were a few of us, we began organizing a monthly dinner to share knowledge about that. Because in 2013, knowledge was scarce about Bitcoin. So we organized a monthly dinner that would take place usually in pizzerias, because there is a special connection between pizzas and Bitcoins, as you may know. And it's during one of those dinners in 2016 that I told my colleagues, I told them this is not a joke, in fact. Bitcoin is not a gadget. It is serious. And we are going to implement a bet on Bitcoin. And we summarized, so we wrote the bet. It took us a page. But since I am a disciple of William of Ockham, I used my favorite tool, Occam's razor, and I simplified the one page in half a page, then in 3 sentences, and in 1 sentence. And the sentence at the end was, one day or another, the largest asset managers in the world will propose Bitcoin invested funds to their clients. And this is a sentence that we wrote in 2016. And in 2024, I guess we won the bet. And the way we implemented the bet in 2016 was, of course, buying Bitcoin. And the way we implement bets at Tobam, it starts always with research. So we organized a dedicated team that would do research around Bitcoin and crypto. And the first job I gave this team was to write an investment thesis on Bitcoin. So we wrote a 90-page paper that we presented to the French regulator. And the French regulator encouraged us to launch a fund that would be invested solely in Bitcoin. It's a fund that we launched in November 2017, and it was the first open-ended fund invested in Bitcoin in the world. So this is the beginning of story of Tobam in Bitcoin. Then we explored other things. In 2020, we noticed MicroStrategy, and we invested in MicroStrategy in 2020. Then we did plenty of research, but I guess we are going to discuss that later on.
Yes, indeed. In terms of research, you recently published an IPE article titled The End of Monetary Trust. You emphasize the emergence of Bitcoin as the ultimate reserve asset in the monetary debasement, but could you share your viewpoint on what is happening in the US at the moment and how this should be taken into consideration for investors?
Okay, yeah. So it's an article we published on the 5th of September 2025 in Investment Pension Europe. What is the idea behind the article? In fact, whether you read Adam Smith or whether you read Milton Friedman, you will realize that whatever they write about the economics relies on the existence of what I like to call an unquestionable asset. You need a cornerstone. The economy is a system in which you essentially exchange trust. It's an exchange of trust between the employee and the employer. It's a system of trust between the seller and the buyer. And whenever you do a transaction, the base of the condition for the transaction is trust. In fact, it can be relatively easily proven that for an economy to work efficiently, it needs this system of trust to have a cornerstone. And this cornerstone is what I call the unquestionable asset. In the past, the cornerstone of trust was gold, but there are a series of problems attached to gold. One of the problem it is that gold is not auditable. If I tell you I have 5 bars of gold, the only way to audit my claim consists into melting the gold. If you really want to audit it properly, there is no other way than to melt the gold. So it's very funny for a cornerstone of trust to be unauditable, in fact. The next cornerstone of trust after 1945 was the dollar. The problem of the dollar, it is that a growing number of people believe and claim that it is of the objective interest of the United States to devaluate strongly the dollar. One of the persons who claims that is Donald Trump himself. And if the perspective of the dollar is to be strongly devaluated, this is not probably compatible with the status of being the cornerstone of trust, of being the unquestionable asset. You are becoming a questionable asset, in fact. So this place of unquestionable asset, of cornerstone of the system of trust, is in a way vacant, or will soon be perceived as more and more vacant. And there is a small orange entity raising its hand and saying, hey guys, I'm a candidate. And in fact, the article we have published, which is called The End of Monetary Trust, the strategic case for the strategic case for preemption of fiscal expansion is really about the fact that if you make the bet that the US administration is clever and plays a good strategy, you will arrive to the conclusion that maybe they are organizing the devaluation of the dollar, and they are organizing the fact that the US is in fact appropriating Bitcoin. Today, most of the largest companies that deal with Bitcoin, the most of the actors of the Bitcoin system have a strong link to the US. And this is definitely what you would do if you knew that the US dollars was going to devaluate and that it was in the interest of the US. So it's a two-page article. I can show you the QR code to the article, or you will put it in the link, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a two-page article which we received many comments on. And this is what this article is about.
And in terms of Tobam and with this research that you've done both on the monetary debasement and on Bitcoin as the ultimate solution, and the reality that the United States government and the US economy overall is taking a big stance into the Bitcoin financial world, the appropriation, as you said. What has been Tobam's institutional investment thesis in Bitcoin? Yes, but as well as we mentioned at the beginning, in the Bitcoin treasury companies, as you've been very early in strategy, and then with Capital B and many more. If Bitcoin is the ultimate store of value, what's your investment thesis on Bitcoin treasury companies?
So the thesis of Tobam with regards to Bitcoin treasury companies is a thesis which really looks at history. And very often I say that, MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor, they apply in fact a business model which is quite old. The business of MicroStrategy starts in my mind in 1694, when a group of businessmen met in London and they decided to create a new corporation, which business model would consist into raising capital in order to buy gold. At that time, gold was the unquestionable asset. It was the cornerstone of the system of trust. Those guys in 1694, they called their corporation the Bank of England. In 1800, a statesman in France called Napoleon organized a meeting amongst the 100 wealthiest families in France. And he told them, guys, you need to do like the English. You're going to create a corporation that will raise capital in order to buy gold, and you're going to call this corporation the Banque de France. And Bank of England and Banque de France became the most influential and the most prosperous companies in the world until they were nationalized in 1945 and 1946. This is the first, clue of our investment thesis. The second clue of our investment thesis is a book that was written in 1976 by the Nobel Prize awarded Friedrich Hayek. Friedrich Hayek wrote a book in 1976 called Denationalization of Money. And I read this book many years after I bought my first Bitcoin, and every page I was turning, I was saying, incredible. Every single page is about the Bitcoin. And if you read this book more deeply, you will realize that in fact it's not about Bitcoin, it's about Bitcoin and MicroStrategy. In fact, I rediscovered not a long time ago, 2 sentences by Hal Finney. Hal Finney is a very serious candidate to be Satoshi Nakamoto. And Hal Finney in 2010 wrote 2 sentences. The first sentence is, there is a very good reason for Bitcoin-backed banks to exist, to issue their own digital cash, potentially redeemable for Bitcoins. The second sentence is even more interesting, and it is really in the center of beliefs of Tobam. Most Bitcoin, so I'm opening the quotation, most Bitcoin transactions will occur between banks to settle net transfers. So in fact, what we really believe at Tobam, it is that the next currency of the world will not be Bitcoin. Bitcoin lacks, some characteristic of what could be a good currency. One of the characteristics that Bitcoin is lacking, it is 10 minutes between each block. It's also the number of transactions that should be done directly in Bitcoin. I think the next currency or currencies, because what Friedrich Hayek advocates for is competition across currencies. Currencies issued, all of them, by companies that own the unquestionable asset, but those currencies need to compete. The currency issued by Strategy will compete with the currency issued by MetaPlanet, will compete with the currency issued by Capital B and the others. But the Bitcoins are not going to move. The job of a central banker consists into managing the balance sheet. A balance sheet composed of 2 parts, the asset part, which needs to be the most boring balance sheet in the world. You accumulate. Banque de France and Bank of England were not very inventive in terms of balance sheet on this part of it. Maybe in the first years it was the case, but very quickly when it became obvious that gold was the unquestionable asset, they used only to accumulate gold. But they were very inventive on the liability side. And really, in my mind, the job of the liability side of the ECB is what? It's that. This is a paper issued by the ECB, which in fact is on the liability side of the balance sheet of the ECB. If the ECB was a proper treasury company, something that has to do with wealth, and not a joke, the asset side would be boring, and the liability side would be inventive. And this is precisely the description of the 2 lines of Hal Finney, and it is precisely the description of the 200 pages of the denationalization of money by Friedrich Hayek. It's very important to understand that the central thesis of Friedrich Hayek, it is that a central bank is condemned to fail if it is government-owned. It cannot work. It needs to be privately owned. It needs to be sheltered from the influence of politicians. Otherwise, it will have exactly the same fate as, let me show you one slide that I presented this morning to a very, very large sovereign wealth fund. don't know whether I can share.
You have a share button at the bottom.
Yeah, so if I want to share a screen, an entire screen, this is it. So this is, sorry. This is the slide I wanted to show you. This is a summary of...
We don't have it yet, Yves.
you cannot see it?
No. Ah, it's coming.
Voilà.
It's coming.
The problem Bitcoin wants to... It's a slide that I showed this morning to an extremely large investor, which is investor at Tobam, by the way. It's one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world. And this is the balance sheet of the Fed, the balance sheet of the ECB, the balance sheet of the Japanese Central Bank, Bank of Japan, and the balance sheet of the Swiss National Bank. You see, what is inflation? It's a definition of Milton Friedman. Inflation has nothing to do with the increase of value of things. It has to do with the increase of abundance of money. If you look at an apple, my favorite example is an apple. If you look at an apple today, it's not more valuable than an apple 30 years ago. It's probably less valuable. It's easier today to produce an apple than it was 30 years ago. But still, an apple is more expensive. It's not because the apple is worth more value. It is simply that the currency you're paying to get this apple has increased dramatically in abundance. And if you recognize the Genesis block of Bitcoin by Satoshi, this is what he wrote. Chancellor on the 3rd of January of 2009, when he issued the Bitcoin, when the first block was mined, he wrote, the Chancellor on break of second bailout. It is the largest title of the Times of that day. And so it's really about that. So really, I believe this is a problem Bitcoin is trying to solve. And when you have that in mind, very quickly, you will arrive to the fact that you cannot trust those currencies anymore. Those currencies that are issued out of thin air. And you will think about the cornerstone of trust, the unquestionable asset. And very quickly you will arrive to the scheme, the historical scheme of the Banque de France and the Bank of England, to the book of Hayek, Denationalization of Money. And you will realize that this is precisely what Michael Saylor, after reading The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, what he began in 2020. This is Michael Saylor. So I should stop sharing maybe. Well, I don't know how to stop sharing. It's here. Okay.
It's okay. So I guess, Yves, with this investment thesis, maybe before going into the details of the valuation models that you have developed at Tobam, I guess it would be very useful for the audience to understand the demand that you've seen from institutional investors and the evolution that you've seen in terms of interest since the beginning of the year towards now as well. And is there any evolution that you can see or level of comprehension? And what on that basis, what do you at Tobam, what have you developed as a mathematical model of understanding of the valuation framework of a Bitcoin treasury company?
So in terms of demand, I usually decompose the adoption, steps of Bitcoins into how many steps? To exactly 4 steps. I would say that the first era was between 2009 until 2013. And between 2009 until 2013, Bitcoin was really a tech thing. really for tech guys, for libertarians, for people in the Silicon Valley, or for people that were very closely connected to cryptography. In 2013, it became speculation, mostly from retail guys, and still, of course, from the cat. So retail people, wealthy people, came on and saw the thing and began to speculate on investment thesis. Speculate is, for me, an activity which is very noble. In some countries of the world, speculation, as soon as somebody pronounces speculation, you're supposed to get your cross out of your pocket and to say, vade retro satanas. Speculation is, again, because of Occam, the importance of names, of words, nominalism. Speculation is a term that has a Latin etymology. The etymology of speculation is speculare. Speculare in Latin means to be able to see. This is why we call, you have spectacles, this is why you have spectators, and this is why you have speculators. A speculator is somebody that has a view on the future and that implements a portfolio which is supposed to take advantage of his view. So in fact, those guys in 2013, 2017 had a view, and there were mostly family offices and retail. I think it's in 2017 that large hedge funds joined the band. And the new era, the one we are in today, I call it usually institutional recognition. And it started in 2024 with the launch of the ETF. Now, the game changer for institution was really the fact that BlackRock, Fidelity, Franklin Templeton, Invesco, and all of the others launched ETF. I would say that between 2019 and 2013, you would invest in Bitcoin only if you were a clown. I consider that those who say the Bitcoin is worth nothing in 2025 are now the clowns. So it's a complete change of attitude, a completely change of adoption. Nobody anymore tells us it's a joke, when in fact the largest CEOs and CIOs of the largest financial institution wrote us letters in the past telling us it's a joke. You cannot be doing that. Today they are the jokes if they don't do it, if you don't consider it. So nobody seriously said, apart from the clown in chef in Europe, apart from herself, nobody says it's a joke anymore. But she is here to entertain us, so it's normal that she does her job properly. So this is a real change of attitude. The fact that you are investing in Bitcoin treasury companies is completely in the core of what we try to do at Tobam, building the exposures that nobody else is providing investors with. Nobody, as a serious, large institutional asset manager as Tobam, is providing this kind of completely specialized fund. And we thought it would be interesting for large institutions to get an exposure to that. And this is what we made available progressively from 2020 and today fully-fledged since May of this year.
So, Yves, you have created new funds at Tobam, and that is also based on your own framework of analysis. I think it would be useful if you could give the different factors that you have modeled through in a quantitative analysis basis at Tobam to analyze a Bitcoin treasury company, evaluate it from a quantitative approach, and look at those different factors.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So it's I guess you're giving us as a reference the article we published on SSRN in May 2025. As I told you, we began looking and buying the MicroStrategy stocks in 2020. And it was very interesting for me to try to understand how it would work if Michael Saylor would run his company the way Bank of England and Banque de France run their companies so successfully during 2 centuries, almost 2 centuries. And we tried to modelize that. And we wrote all of that, and we decided to publish that in March 2025. Tobam is not a research institute, so our aim is not to publish. Our aim is to run portfolios and to invest our clients' money. Why did we decide to do that? Because there were a lot of urban legends about MicroStrategy, saying MicroStrategy is a leverage bet. And for those of us like us who understood, what was effectively MicroStrategy, it is an urban legend that we wanted to fight. MicroStrategy is not only about an enormous quantity of debt that leverages Bitcoin. It was something different. And this is why we decided to publish our article in March 2025. So you can download the article with this QR code. This article became, after 60 days, the most downloaded article in the field History of Finance of SSRN. And if I wanted to introduce the article in a few minutes, I would show you this slide. In fact, if you take the performance of MicroStrategy across any period of time, whether it's 1 day or 3 months or 5 years, and you compare it to the performance of Bitcoin, you will see that, for instance, on the full period, MicroStrategy delivered 645%, when Bitcoin delivered 223. Now, if you add 203 plus 303, this is 505. 505 plus 139 exactly equals, 506 plus 139 exactly equals 645. The same fashion, if you add minus 13 to plus 3, that's minus 10. Minus 10 minus 64 gives you exactly 74. So across any period of time, you can decompose arithmetically, not statistically, the returns of any Bitcoin treasury companies into 3 factors. The first factor is the Bitcoin yield. The Bitcoin yield is a mechanical term which cannot be negative unless the company is managed poorly. The second term is the effect of the performance of Bitcoin. Since those companies own Bitcoin, they exhibit a certain beta to Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin varies, the performance of the company, everything else being equal, varies with exactly beta times the performance of Bitcoin, having in mind that it's a very specific beta because it's a convex beta. It's a beta that grows with time, especially grows very, very steeply when there is a strong up momentum on Bitcoin. And the third term is a relatively simple function of what is known as the MNAV, as the ratio between the valuation of the company to, in fact, the premium, to be more precise, because it's a difference of MNAV. So it's really the premium or the change of the premium of the Bitcoin treasury company. So it is those 3 terms that really, if you understand them well, you will be in a good situation to probably invest in those companies. So could I comment something on that? So whatever of those companies you take, if you take, for instance, during the last 2 years, if you look at this ridiculous orange line here, this is the 300% return in 2 years of Bitcoin. And during those 2 years, MicroStrategy delivered 835%, MetaPlanet delivered 4,900%, and those figures, the 800 and the 4,900, are exactly the results of this equation. They are to the cent equal to the sum of those three things. The Bitcoin yield represents the increase of the number of Bitcoins per share of the company we are looking at. The Bitcoin exposures will tell you that what you own in your balance sheet is more or less valuable, depending on whether Bitcoin went up or down. And the MNAV is a very interesting term because it's completely stochastic. This one is mechanical. This one is completely stochastic. This one is also stochastic because it's a function of the Bitcoin price, but as a function of Bitcoin, it's completely deterministic. This one is very stochastic, and it's the most fascinating of the terms. It is the MNAV. The MNAV measures how much the agents are okay to pay, in addition, in a way, to the value of the assets when they consider buying a share of capital B. Some people will tell you it's a mystery. Why are they okay to pay more? They are okay to pay more the same way that the shareholder of a company called Hermes, when you buy a share of Hermes, you pay more than the value of the factories. You pay more than the values of the assets. Why? Because you are a speculator. Because you are speculating that Hermes will, in the future, generate some earnings that are in excess with a certain multiple to the value of the assets. Why would you buy capital B at an MNAV which is higher than 1? Because you speculate that capital B will generate some future Bitcoin yield, and you speculate a strong momentum on Bitcoin. And this is what justifies MNAV, and this is what justifies the very strong variations of MNAV you can see in markets. MNAV going crazy high, 23% MNAV for Metaplanet, 20 times MNAV for Smarter Web, or MNAV going crazy down to an unjustifiable level, which is close to 1, which doesn't make sense. And those variations are stochastic, and they represent exactly the expectations of the agents, expectations crystallized in the MNAV or in the price of the Bitcoin treasury companies as a ratio, as a multiple of the assets they own. So you see, you can do this decomposition that I did for capital, for MicroStrategy, for strategy. You can do it. You can do it for Metaplanet. You can do it for capital B. And you will see how much typically at the bottom of the crisis, of the meltdown of the MNAV, how much the Bitcoin yield has been generous for the shareholders, how much the performance of Bitcoin has been generous. And when Bitcoin produced 65%, because we have a convex beta, a beta that increases with time, this transforms from 65 to 203. And you see also that in the period of the review, of course, the premium was destroyed a lot of value for the shareholders. And the sum of those three terms are exactly the performance of capital B. So this is the article that you can download. Okay, I cannot invite you enough to download the article. You have the QR code here, and it's free of charge.
How would you analyze, Yves, speaking of premiums, the evolution of the premium over the summer and the last 3 to 5 months that you mentioned doesn't make sense right now in terms of how down it has come compared to how it didn't potentially make sense as well to the extremes at around the months of May and June. So how do you analyze that in terms of the
As I
compression?
told you, in my mind, the MNAV is on a real-time basis the crystallization expectations of the agents, of those who are active in the market. It's a crystallization of their expectation of future Bitcoin yield and future momentum on Bitcoin. So remember, we were until June, roughly, still with a crazy momentum on Bitcoin in 2024. I think that in the last quarter of 24, I'm not sure about the figure, but I think in the last quarter of 2024, Bitcoin went up almost by 100% or 80% in a couple of months. So the momentum was crazy. All of us, we thought it's a bull run, and we had an incredible disappointment. We were disappointed by the fact that Bitcoin had one of the most quiet years ever in 2025. Between January, if you look at the price of Bitcoin between January until now, in euro terms, not in dollar terms, you will see that the Bitcoin is up something like maybe 7% year to date in euro term. In dollar it's more, but it's really because the dollar went down more than something else. So Bitcoin has been incredibly disappointing. And when you're disappointed because a part of your expectation is on the momentum of Bitcoin, this is a very large part of the expectations. Because you are disappointed about that, when an agent is disappointed, he's ready to pay less. So you had some sell outflows here. And the problem you have here, it is that some of those stocks are not extremely liquid. Which means that as soon as you sell relatively large quantities, we are not talking about really large quantity, but relatively to the volume, quantities that are relatively large, it has a huge market impact. Market impact can be our friend, by the way. If Bitcoins were so high, 20% here, 23% here, even 14% here, it's also because of a high market impact. So it works both ways. This is why I know very well that as soon as we will have some serious inflows of buy orders on Capital B and the others, it will have an enormous impact on the price. Because those stocks are not extremely liquid. So those who sell it will have a negative impact, a strong impact on the price down. Those who buy it will have a strong impact on the price up. And this is my comment about the past. And my comment about the future, it is that I am not sure at all those companies have reached their all-time high in terms of MNAV. I don't see any reason for that to be the case. Today we are in this situation. We have two engines. We have the price of the Bitcoin and we have the MNAV. On the MNAV front, we are very close to what I call the century territory. MNAV cannot be, in a sustainable fashion, strongly lower than 1. Why? Because on the assets page of the balance sheet, you have the most liquid asset of the world. Not buying a treasury company with an MNAV of 0.8 or 0.9 is difficult to justify. You know very well that it's extremely likely not to be sustainable, this kind of price. Apart if you have a very specific risk, if there is a fraud or something else, it's different. But apart from that, if the company is run properly, if the legacy business is not losing money, it's very, very difficult to justify why would this kind of companies, offer an MNAV which is strongly below 1 in a sustainable fashion. Now it can go below 1 because it's offer and demand. If you sell, and you have no buyers, it will go below 1, but it's not sustainable. And there has been an announcement by Metaplanet, I think, today, saying, guys, if you're ready to sell the company at an MNAV which is significantly below 1, guys, we are going to buy it. Yeah, and the Bitcoin yield that could be generated by buying your own stock is as strong as the one you can generate by selling your stock. When the MNAV is higher than 1 and when the MNAV is lower than 1 on the other side of the event. So for the MNAV, I am more than optimistic. I know very well it cannot be close to 1. I believe the equilibrium MNAV is, I'm not going to give you figures, but we have studies. We know we are very strongly opinionated on what is a normal MNAV for larger companies, for medium-sized companies, or for small companies. And for all of them, it's far away from the current levels we have in the markets. The other engine is what? It's the most important of all engines. If any of us is buying treasury companies, it's only because we are bullish on Bitcoin. There is no other real engine. This is the mother of all engines, if I may say so. And if I wanted to show you one slide, so what has happened in 2025? Let me tell you what has happened in 2025. Incredibly strong people began buying Bitcoins. The Sovereign Wealth Fund of Luxembourg. Luxembourg is not exactly the less conservative country in Europe. Abu Dhabi. Harvard management company, the endowment of Harvard themselves, they bought Bitcoins a couple of months ago. Those are what are usually called in the market the strong hands. They bought. How come the price is not going up? Because some people sold. Who sold? By definition, those who sold are those who owned Bitcoin a long time ago. And by definition, those who own Bitcoin a long time ago are not strong hands. It's people like me. People that are incredibly weak in terms of hands when compared to Abu Dhabi, to Luxembourg, and to Harvard. I have to confess, I'm going to tell you something personal. I sold about 4% of my exposure to Bitcoin this year. For the second time in my life, I sold some Bitcoin this year. The first time was just before COVID. Just before COVID, I sold about 8% of my Bitcoin's exposure. This time I sold 4%. I don't have any Bitcoins now, by the way. I only own treasury companies. So I sold about 4% of them. Why? I would say it's because of family pressure and the pressure I put on myself. So I sold a tiny part of it in order to take profits, because all of this money that I invested so many years ago, I need to enjoy it. I am a weak hand. The most positive signal on Bitcoin could be summarized into a figure. It's 60%, the figure. The figure is 60%. If you want to remember 2025, between January and October, with regards to Bitcoin, you need to remember the figure 60. 60 is the performance of gold year to date. This is the most bullish signal you could have on Bitcoin. The last time you had a surge on gold was in 2020. As soon as the surge on gold topped a little bit, Bitcoin price was multiplied by 5. In 2025, we have with this part of the curve. And we have this part of the curve. We're still here. We have a question mark. And we have a question mark here. Maybe it's going to continue, by the way. In that case, Bitcoin will do something like that. But as soon as it will be toppish, those who made the strong momentums of Bitcoins, the hedge funds, will try to harvest their next fruit, and it's going to be Bitcoin. So those who are invested like Tobam in Capital B, in MetaPlanet, in all of those things, or in the funds of Tobam, I really believe that the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Abu Dhabi, which is invested with us, I told them this morning, this is you guys. You are on the Tobam surfing board, and if the Bitcoin wave comes, you're going to enjoy the ride. This is my view on where we are in terms of... Don't ask me too many questions, because every question takes me 10 minutes. Huh? I'm not fluent in English, so it takes me a lot of time to develop an idea.
So Yves, you've been a very strong hand, despite what you say. You are one of the stronger hands in my book for Bitcoin and Bitcoin treasury companies. In fact, you've been definitely a very important and great partner for Capital B since the very beginnings. What has been your journey as a Capital B shareholder, Capital B strategic investor at Tobam, and what have you learned along the way?
What I have learned, to be frank with you, I hold some Bitcoins or some Bitcoin-related investments for a long time. So volatility is always something which is difficult to handle, but I think I handle it quite well. So when suddenly you have a shock, you're shocked, but as the next day and the next week, you say, after all, it's only stochastics. It's only expectations. Prices are only the crystallization of expectation. So when the price is too high, you need to be reasonable. And when the price is too low, you need also to be reasonable and to say, after all, am I holding a strong asset or not? This is what matters. The fact that the others have speculation that it's going to fall down or speculation that it's going to go up is not the right barometer to hold Bitcoins. With, at the end of the day, volatility is about what? Volatility is about the difficulty to evaluate things. And very often I say Bitcoin has a strong volatility. Why? Because Bitcoin is a project. Bitcoin is not a currency. Bitcoin is, you cannot use Bitcoin in your shopping malls. You don't use Bitcoins to do the accounting of your company, so it's not money. It's a project of money. And a project is always systematically associated with volatility. There is volatility because it's a project. And pricing a startup is the most difficult art on our planet. It's difficult to evaluate a startup, pricing it. And when something is difficult to price, there is volatility. And the fact that the price varies means that the prices are not reliable. The MNAV of Capital B is not something which is very reliable. So if it's 3 or 4 or 6, at the end what matters is, do you trust the business model? Do you trust the asset? Don't you trust the people? Do you trust the people? Do you trust that they are sincere, that they are actually doing what they claim they are doing? If you do so, you're comfortable. And volatility, when you have a volatility of 100% and the asset is worth 10, it means that you have no idea whether it's worth 5 or 20. Volatility is the uncertainty of the price. So you know the right valuation is somewhere, and the actual price that you can see on the market is a subjective evaluation of the value of the asset, but it's subjective. And this volatility, the higher the volatility, the least you should look at short-term movements. You should be at ease or comfortable or uncomfortable with the long-term optics, but looking at the MNAV on a daily basis. The MNAV has an impact because on Bitcoin yield, etc., but it varies so quickly because of low liquidity, because of the volatility of the asset, that you need to be quiet and stay calm.
And now there are hundreds of companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet that are publicly listed. How do you select the ones that you want to draw and put the more attention to, or the most focus to? What has Capital B done that you have considered of great value? What is also your anticipation for the future of this industry going forward?
Okay, so we, because we are relatively well known in this field as a visible asset manager in this field, of course, everybody that has a project on that field, especially in Europe, will contact us to try to convince us to either to buy their stock, or at least they will consult us to check what is our opinion on the way they are going to run the specificities of their projects. So after looking at so many projects, we came up now with a due diligence questionnaire. So we have organized a due diligence questionnaire, which is about 200 questions, which really tries to collect all of the information we believe is crucial for the success of a Bitcoin treasury companies. So I would say that in the case of Capital B, if I was frank, I would say there was only one problem, which was the fact that I'm not going to be specific, but let's say it this way. Nowadays, a company has to have a headquarters, and most of the companies of this planet have their headquarters in a country. And some countries are more kleptomaniac than others. So it's important that you make sure that the project you're looking at have organized a plan B, if I may say so. I think it's Lugano today. Now it's a Lugano conference today. So it's another kind of plan B. So that if the government becomes more kleptomaniac, even more kleptomaniac than he was. So, and this is a point that when we began the discussion with Capital B, we told them, guys, I'm not sure in which country you want to base your headquarters. Make sure that if the country is not very high in terms of standard of not being kleptomaniac, make sure you are open-minded. Make sure that you have a setup for a plan B. And the answers you gave us at that time were very satisfactory. but it's typically a point of attention that we had when we looked at the capital B project on the early days. So we have 4 chapters. We call those 4 chapters the purity of the model. We don't want you to accumulate something else than Bitcoin. It's a systematic use of proceeds. We want something which is very systematic in the use of proceeds. We look very much at the custody, how you custody the Bitcoin. We look very much at the fact that there should not be any cash flow leakage. We look at, we want a tax audit. We want a regulatory audit. The second chapter is transparency. So we look very much at the way you communicate, the different parameters and how much they are audited. Then we look at things that are more market driven, typically the existence of a premium. A very important chapter for us is how much powerful the capital table is. It's very important for the cap table not to be 100% retail, if I may say so quickly, because it makes it relatively fragile. So you want to have on the capital table people that are committed on the long term, and people that not only are committed, but people that are powerful. You need to have a seasoned executive team in terms of financial engineering. And if you can, you want the company to be anchored in a relatively powerful retail market, having in mind that nowadays there is only one powerful retail market, which is the US. Very powerful market. So it's a step that any growing company of this kind should have in mind to expand towards the US, but it's not something which is difficult. It only takes time. So this is my long comment again, Alexandre, sorry for that, on your question.
And maybe to end, Yves, what would be your look forward for the industry and your anticipation of how Bitcoin treasury companies can gain dominance on each of their region, both in America,
So
Europe, Asia?
I had a similar question, which is a little bit different, so I am going to answer the different question first. This morning, when I was meeting with the Sovereign Wealth Fund, they asked me, but there is some kind of a crowd effect on treasury companies. How do you deal with that? My answer was very strong. The size of the treasury companies nowadays are simply ridiculous, including strategy. The market cap of strategy is $100 billion. Can you imagine how ridiculously small it is? France issues, it's less than a quarter of the coupons of the French debt. France is going to reimburse, I don't know, $500 billion this year, I think, or something like that, or next year. So $100 billion is ridiculous. It's ridiculously small. It's incredibly small. Yeah, it's as if you told me Bitcoin is the future unquestionable asset of the world, and Bitcoin is worth, the total of Bitcoin is worth $2 billion. This is what Bitcoin was worth when its price was $100. Some people thought it was expensive at $100. This is the future unquestionable asset. So it's going to be much, much bigger than that, than what it is today. And strategy and the allies are so ridiculously small today when compared to their future role in the global economy. So I'm extremely positive. I could be wrong. So don't trust me. Do your own research. Make your mind when you invest. The one who advises is never the one who makes the losses. when you buy or you sell, you are going to make money or you are going to lose money. So do your own research. But on my side, I am incredibly optimistic on Bitcoin and on the financial industry, which is going to use Bitcoin as, the unquestionable asset.
A question for the end that we always ask is what is a message that you would have for capital B shareholders that have enjoyed the ride, both in the upside and the share price drawdowns, and now again up a bit more in the last days? What would you say to them, and
So my
especially for the ones?
sincere advice and my sincere message is don't look too much at the price. If you look at Bitcoin last year, I think the bottom price was in the region of $30,000 or $40,000. At the end of the year, it was $100,000. Price are the crystallization of expectations. It's completely subjective. The price of capital B is subjective. At any single moment in time, it's subjective. What you buy is not, don't try to market time to time the market. Obviously, today, it's, in my mind, subjectively very likely to be very cheap. But you need to be at ease with the quantity of money you have invested there. And price is not reliable. It's so much volatile that price is simply reflects the affordability at which price you can, how much you need to pay in order to buy it. And that's it, and that varies a lot. Don't look every day at the price. Be relaxed. And if you believe the figures I showed you on what is the adverse scenario? The adverse scenario on Bitcoin and on capital B is the same. Central banks being, in a durable fashion, orthodox. This is the only adverse scenario for Bitcoin. If central banks become orthodox forever, Bitcoin is useless. And that day, capital B will not be worth a lot. In another case, I think you can be optimistic on both Bitcoin and on capital B. This is my long advice. As I told you, I talk a lot, so every time you ask me a question, you take a risk.
Well, thank you so much, Yves. I think people will have a lot to read between your article in French Revue Banque and in English IPE on the debasement that is happening and the US appropriation of Bitcoin overall and the trends that are at stake. And as well on your article about Bitcoin treasury companies and following you in general, I think is definitely great for your point of views. So thank you so much, Yves, for coming, and hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Edson. Thank you, everybody.